All right, we'll call this general meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Sorry we're running a little bit late. Mr. Clerk, any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening?
Mr. Chair, I see none at this time.
All right, we do have some reports coming out of closed session. I'll pass it on to Councillor Crowley. I sent my regrets for the closed session items, so I will remove myself from the room and abstain from the votes both here and at council later this evening. So, Councillor Crowley?
Thank you, Chair Beamer. So we have a number of reports coming out of closed session. So the very first one that we have is that Council approved the recommendation outlined in report CAO PC 25-03 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the Chief Administrative Officer as follows. That the minutes of settlement between the city and QP 1833 dated September 29th, 2025 that sets out new terms for a collective agreement covering the 3-year period January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2026 be approved. And we will take a vote. Oh, sorry. Oh, we do need a mover. Who wants to move it? Councillor Duguay had his hand up first. Apologize. We will take a vote. Yes. And Councillor Beamer is abstaining. And that was carried. Second, we have 5B. The council approved the recommendations outlined in report CSFS 25-003 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the Commissioner of Community Service as follows. That staff be authorized to proceed as outlined in closed session report CSFS 25-003 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the Commissioner of Community Services. Councillor Parnell will move it. And we will take a vote. Okay. Oh. All right, and that was carried. We move on to 5C. The council approve the recommendations outlined in report LSCLK 25-021 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the city clerk as follows. That closed session report LSC LK 25-021 be received for information. Councillor Duguay is moving it. Just call point of order.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair Crowley. I believe Councillor Lachica and Councillor Riel and myself will recuse ourselves from this report and the following report, as we did in closed session.
Fair enough. Point of order is well met. Kendra, do we need to reset the voting? Okay. No, I think she's going to mark him as absence. I think we're okay. All right, we'll take a vote. That's Parnell is a yes. Okay, that was carried. And then we move on to 5D. Moved by Councillor Hakey that council approve the recommendations outlined in closed session report LSO CS 25-017 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the city solicitor as follows. That staff be authorized to proceed as outlined in closed session report LSO CS 25-017 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the city solicitor. It's carried. If we want to bring them back in. Jeez, they're bad. Terrible. I know. All right, the next item we have on the agenda is 5E. The council, oh, we need a mover for that one. Councilor Duguay. The council approved the recommendations outlined in report LSO CS 25-018 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the city solicitor as follows. The council proceed as outlined in closed session report LSO CS 25-018 dated November 3rd, 2025 of the city solicitor respecting review of the OMB appeal RAOPA 173 and zoning bylaw 16-053. And we'll take a vote. And that is carried. Last one we have is that council approved the recommendations outlined in report CSSS 25-014 dated November 3rd, 2025, the Commissioner of Community Services as follows. That staff be authorized to proceed as outlined in closed session report CSSS 25-014 dated November 3rd, 2025, of the Commissioner of Community Services respecting council's approval in relation to RFP-48-25 for the low barrier shelter service delivery and operator. Keith, would you like to move that?
Through the chair, I'll move B, C, and D of that report.
Okay. B, C, and D of that report is on the floor. John, is that in order?
Mr. Chair, the report did contemplate various options for council's consideration this evening. There was, the council did consider or has reviewed options B, C, and D.
Okay, so those options are in order. We will take a vote. Right, and that was carried. So that is it for our closed session reports. Thank you, everyone. I'll throw it over to Chair Beamer.
Thank you, Councillor Crowley. All right, so we do have one presentation this evening for our general committee, presentation of the 2026 draft budget. And with that, Commissioner Freeman, the floor is yours. He said, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Beamer. Good evening, members of council and my staff colleagues. We're pleased this evening to be able to present the 2026 staff recommended budget to you this evening. And I have a number of slides that I would like to go through here this evening. Staff are simply presenting the budget. We're not asking council here this evening to make any decisions. The presentation is simply a high-level overview. At the beginning of the book that you received on your desk here this evening is a staff report The report does provide a high-level summary. The appendix does include a number of recommendations, many that are familiar to you, that you have seen in previous iterations of the budget. The highlights book, of course, does include all of the operating and capital budget summaries. There is no, so a couple of changes here that I just want to flag right off the hop here. There is no other staff recommended or a staff identified needs in the budget. The budget is the budget, and there's nothing else that we're bringing forward as being on our radar here as part of the budget this evening, or included in the budget book. The book, of course, does include a bunch of supplementary information. It talks about staffing, it talks about tax assessment, it talks about tax rate, and then the whole last section of the book is really the user fees, the schedule of user fees that will form the user fee bylaw. In terms of my details comments here this evening, I just want to circle back earlier in the year. Of course, I stood before you in June, and we talked about at that point in time what was forecast to be on the radar of staff in terms of the 2026 budget. I informed you at that time that staff had, or myself as treasurer, had received a direction from the mayor. I'm not going to read the letter, but it is provided in your package here this evening. There's three key takeaways in the direction I've received from the mayor, and that is to bring forward a budget that would maintain levels of service, that would provide for inflationary increases, and then number three, when it comes to police services, pencil in an increase of 10% on that budget line. And that was the direction that I undertook to bring before you here this evening. So also as part of that presentation back in June, I had listed at that point in time, there was a number of things that were on my radar as treasurer, as knowing that was coming down the pipe, and I wanted to bring to your attention already then. So I just want to circle back to that and just give you an update on how did we fare. Was it more or less, and were there other new items that came forward and bubbled up to the surface as priorities needing to be dealt with? And so I've listed them here for you. I've provided the details, and then I've provided 3 columns. What did I say in June? What's included in the draft budget here this evening? And then what were the differences? So just starting right off the hop here were the personnel costs, the net compensation increases, and that number was not quite as much as what I had forecasted at that point in time. We talked about the fact that in housing and homelessness, there was monies funded from reserve in 2025. What's included in the budget, I have brought forward the $1,094,000 into the budget as part of the base budget. So that is not being funded, proposed to be funded by reserve. That is actually included in the budget this evening from the tax rate. I talked about contingency and the fact that a corporation of our size to have a healthy contingency should be in the order of magnitude of at least 1% of the budget. That would put our number between $3 and $4 million, or even over $4 million actually. And our contingency that I'm forecasting, or the provision of contingency in 2026, is $1,250,000, so far less than even 1%. I talked about insurance and the fact that the insurance markets had been stabilizing, but that we needed to pencil in an increase. And in discussions with our broker, we penciled in more than what I forecasted back in June, and so the increase is in the order of magnitude of about 5%, or $439,000. I talked about the fact that the climate tax, the climate incentive tax, the federal government was canceling that tax, and so that is penciled in. That is being brought forward in the budget that's before you here this evening. But the fact that there is also an increase in terms of consumption of liters of forecasted usage, and so there's kind of competing things happening on this budget item. We have the climate tax that has been removed, but yet we have an increased usage, and so a net reduction of $177,000. There was some other decreases from reserves, mainly as a result of what I just talked about a moment ago with the shelter services being funded previously from reserves in 2025 and being moved into the tax base. That's the biggest influence on that budget line. There was a number of items, though, that kind of bubbled up as we moved through and put together the detailed budget that I want to draw to your attention. And the first one was, and you're seeing it when the Fed has made a number of announcements most recently about interest rates and how are they impacting the city's budget. And so we have pulled back on our forecasted interest revenues, and I have pulled in a reduction of about $500,000 for reduced interest rates. We are, and it's no surprise, we're seeing it right across Ontario, the number of housing starts and zoning applications, and we have reduced our planning application fees, and that's by about $464,000. We are also forecasting reduced landfill tipping fees, about $401,000. However, we are anticipating an increase in transit ridership. Transit revenues continue to grow, and there is also included in your budget a proposed increase in the fee, and so we're forecasting $1 million of additional revenues. As well as we have done a detailed look at some of the transit costs to operate, and we have reduced material costs by about $800,000. As I mentioned a moment ago, in terms of in reference to the direction received from the mayor, I had penciled in a 10% increase on that line. However, when police services brought forward their budget, they included or asked for a request of 9.8%, so not quite the 10. However, there was a number of increases from other outside agencies. So, and I've noted them here for you. So paramedics, I had estimated 3%. They're asking for 7.39. Public health, I had estimated 3%. They're asking for 5%. And as what we heard at last committee meeting, that of course assumes that we're providing all of the, we're going to take all of the mitigation funding that's being received in 2026 and directing that to reducing the tax levy. Otherwise, that budget line would have went up 20%, not 5%. And you can see the other impacts of the outside agencies. So Fairhaven at 3.4, Orca at 5.3, the Humane Society at 3.6, and then some others. As part of the 2025 budget, Council directed that in 2026, the capital financing policy transition to 2%. That's included in the budget before you this evening. And I had also talked about the fact that we have diminishing returns when it comes to how much we can pay directly in our capital program. I had forecasted an inflationary increase of capital levy, but I have foregone that $64,000 at this point in time. As well, we had talked about the fact that there was some capital levy repayment or that was reduced in 2025's budget, and we have put that back in that $52,000. Altogether, the impacts as a result of what I had forecasted in June was 15.8, almost 16 million. What brought before you here this evening is 17.2 million, and then when we add on the impact of the sewer surcharge and wastewater protection, when we're talking about the all-inclusive rate, we're over $18 million. Now, there's a lot of information there. So I'm going to chunk it up a little bit, and we're going to talk about what now, if we're looking at the budget in total now, and we're going to isolate out now the pieces of it in terms of what's operating, what's capital, what's outside organizations. So I'm going to start with so under the purview of the CAO and the commissioners, what is the increase this evening that's before you in the budget book? And what's in the budget book is 3.25. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to talk about some information that's not in the budget book and that's going to impact that number. But for the moment, I can't change the budget document. We're actually updating the budget almost in real time anymore, it seems. But what's included, what is on the list that I just reviewed with you in that last screen, and I realized we flipped through it pretty quickly, but if I isolate out under the purview of the CAO and commissioners, that's 3.25%, 3.25. If I isolate out in that list that I just showed you a moment ago, what is the impact of the outside organizations? What is that number? That number is 1.88%. And that starts with what's happening with police, and then you can see the rest of the lists there, 1.88%. And then what's happening in capital? So if we take a look at, we can all see the impacts of our capital program in our community and the focus on roads and so on in our community, the fact that we've been able to open up some new facilities and retrofits to parks and open spaces and so on, that's 2.71%. So in the book this evening, and I'm stressing that, in the book before you is an all-inclusive rate of 7.84%. Now, I'm going to change that number because I have new information that's not in the book, and I want to draw it to your attention. So what's in front of you is 7.84 in the book. However, we have received some new information, and the new information actually come last week. In fact, I was dealing with it last Thursday and Friday, so it's not reflected in the book because I can't change what's already been in print or gone to print. So we did get revised or reduced benefit cost estimates from Industrial Alliance, our benefits provider, that surprisingly will see some relief. So it's a welcome change. And altogether of the $665,000, and this is the tax supported portion, the portion of the benefit costs that will impact the tax levy, you can see the split here between all the city staff groups as well as police services, because we administer benefits on behalf of police services, of 665,000, and that is a reduction, and that will be spread over across all city divisions and departments across the budget. As well, late last week, I think it was Friday actually, I received notification from the province that the OMPF funding number is more than what I was anticipating, and that number has gone up by 268,900. So altogether, just last week, I'm pleased to bring before your report here this evening that we have additional reductions of 933,900. Now, how does all that impact what I just told you a moment ago that's in print before you and the 7.84%? So if I'm restating that now, the operating number that I just told you a moment ago was 3.25 because that's what's in the printed page before you. That number actually, under the purview of the CAO and commissioners, is 2.93%. The the outside organizations, of which the majority is police services, becomes now 1.79. I'm assuming no change in the education taxes, and then the capital financing and the sewer surcharge stay the same. So this evening, in terms of the staff recommended budget, we're sitting at 7.43% here tonight. And of course, there's a number of recommendations that will be moved for purposes of discussion. I will be bringing forward, I'll work with Chair Beamer and Chair Hickey, and we will bring forward recommendations to bring in the reductions in the benefit costs as well as the amendment to the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. There is one other change that I am aware of that's looming out there, and in fact, Council is going to receive a number of reports that are dated November 17th. So there's no shortage of areas in the budget that could put upwards pressure on the rate, and there's going to be a number brought forward to you in terms of staff reports for your information. There was a decision made by the County of Peterborough fairly recently that would also impact the tax rate, and that will impact the community development program budget. And so again, I would just put as for your information here this evening. Now, there's a number of things that are a number of pages in the book to just bring to your attention. I'm not going to go through them all in detail here this evening, but on page 7 of the budget book, of course, is what we call the comparative rates and levies. Or if you're looking for just a high level snapshot, where we were last year, what's it look like in terms of the staff recommended budget? You can see the comparison of the numbers there. And then that note 2 at the bottom, which of course is written in fine print that nobody can read, is actually talks about what is the impact of 1%. So I just want to pull that out and show that's the in the presentation here, and just bring it out and make reference to that. If council would like to reduce the number even further, to put that into context, to pull it just 1% from 7.4 to 6.4, that number is $2.27 million of tax supported expenditures, not gross expenditures, tax supported expenditures. What does that mean? What does it mean here in terms of the where we're at in terms of the assessment, our median assessed value that you'll see in a moment here is still from 2016 of $260,000, and of course the provincial government continues to hold on terms of reassessments, and that would be an impact of $405 annually, or $33 per month. And just to note on the assessment, we continue to sit at the 2016 assessed values, which were the current value assessments theoretically at 2020. I draw on page 4 again to your attention. This is an important chart because it reconciles the tax levy requirement from one year to the next. So it starts with where were we at the beginning of at the end of 2025, and as we move forward to 2026, what are the key impacts dollar-wise that result in the net tax levy requirement for 2026? So that's what this chart is. It tries to boil it all down into some pretty high-level summary, but it tells you what are the key drivers of the budget. And then lastly, in terms of an operating, what does a residential taxpayer pay for? On pages 8 and 9, you can see a chart here. If somebody asks you a question about, well, how much does this service cost, or how much does that service cost? Here's a chart that you can go to at a fairly high level, but at least it provides visibility and insight into what is the what it costs a residential taxpayer for various services. The capital program in the 2026 budget is $140 million. It seems like a lot of money. However, if I was doing the right thing by the community, I'd be bringing forward a capital budget of $250 million. In bringing forward a budget of only 140, we are going behind in terms of our infrastructure investments about $130 million in 2026. To just put that into perspective, we should be doubling, if we're doing the right thing by the community, doubling the capital program. So I just put that out there. Staff are pretty passionate about the state of infrastructure, and you can see the investments made. I think that's Braley Drive. I get a nod here from my commissioner colleague. And I believe Fire Station 2 and 681 Monaghan Road round out the pics there of what you're seeing on screen. Of course, we have pulled in capital financing from a myriad of sources, everything and anything available to us in terms of financing the $140 million. And you can see the list there that we continue to use and turn to. And then lastly, is where are all the investments? The $140 million, you can see the big chunk from about the 4 o'clock position right around to almost the 9 o'clock position, right into the core infrastructure, and then up in municipal operations on the left-hand side, and then over on the right-hand side, our investment primarily in facilities on the right-hand side there, and that chunk that's in the red color. Last year, we introduced, as part of the 2025 budget, some new tools online, and those features are available again for residents in our community. The technology is called Open Book, and it gives new visualization and transparency into the budget document, and you can play around with seeing the budget in different graphical forms, and well as different summaries that might provide insight at additional levels of detail. So those features are available to residents in the community. As per normal, there's a number of course, events coming up specific to the budget. Of course, here this evening, we're presenting the staff recommended budget. We call the staff recommended budget because I do not want to trigger the mayor's budget as per the Strong Mayors Act. Of course, the mayor wants a consultative process. It is a staff recommended budget that allows the opportunity for members of the council to weigh in and make recommendations before we actually trigger the clock that the legislation speaks to. There's a couple of informal public meetings coming up. The first one on Wednesday night, I believe it's at Healthy Planet Arena. And then on the 10th, it will be right downstairs in the foyer here of City Hall. And as well, we have a formal delegations that will happen on the 10th. We'll review some outside agencies. And on the 10th, we're going to hear from police services. We've already heard from the health unit and paramedics. I tried to line them up for the 10th, but we're actually going to hear from them on November 17th. And then we're going to get right into detailed budget deliberations on November 17th and 18th. And those are full day meetings. And then we'll see where the conversation goes. But the schedule so far anticipates a budget approval or adoption in early December. So with that, Mr. Chairman, as normal, here's our contact information. I make that available, of course, to all members of council and the community. If they want to reach out, they have the opportunity to do so. So with that, that is my presentation. We're sitting at 7.43 here tonight.
Commissioner, thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you for all your hard work, and Yvette and Dan as well. So any questions from my colleagues? Councillor Hickey?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Richard. I just want to be clear. In that number, is the 0.9% included in there that we discussed earlier this evening?
Mr. Chairman, council is rapidly changing the number, and it is not. So what was just contemplated in the motion of just a few moments ago adds to my number. And so if my math is correct, that would add about a 0.55 to the number.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hickey, any further questions? Commissioner, thanks as always.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clerk, do we need a mover for that presentation, or? So just to receive for information, moved by Councillor Hickey, we'll take a vote. And that is carried. We have no notice of motion. Other business, colleagues? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Councillor Baldwin, we'll take a vote. Mr. Chair, do we need a few minutes to just transition? Okay. That is carried. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes for City Council. Thank you.